بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Chapter 50, Al-Hafidh Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala says, Babul Khawf. قال الله تعالى وإياي فارهبون. وقال تعالى إن بطش ربك لشديد. وقال تعالى وكذلك أخذ ربك إذا أخذ القرى وهي ظالمة إن أخذه أليم شديد إن في ذلك لآية لمن خاف عذاب الآخرة ذلك يوم مجموع له الناس وذلك يوم مشهود وما نؤخره إلا لأجل معدود يوم يأتي لا تكلم نفس إلا بإذنه فمنهم شقي وسعيد فأما الذين شقوا ففي النار لهم فيها زفير وشهيق. وقال تعالى ويحذركم الله نفسه. وقال تعالى يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه. وقال تعالى يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم يوم ترونها تذهل كل مرضعة عما أرضعت وتضع كل ذات حمل حملها وترى الناس سكارى وما هم بسكارى ولكن عذاب الله شديد. وقال تعالى ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان الآيات. طيب, Nawawi rahimahullah mentions the 50th chapter, the chapter of fear. The chapter of fear. Babul Khawf. After he mentions dealing with people outwardly, taking the outward sense, not poking and digging and investigating into the internal secrets of people, and between or before Babul Raja, the chapter of hope from Allah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a secret behind this. From the secrets behind this is the combination of fear and hope, the balance of fear and hope, lacking extremism, and one having one without the other. Also, when you're afraid of yourself, you're afraid for yourself, afraid of Allah for yourself, you're concerned and you're worried about your sins, your mistakes, that prevents you from busying yourself day and night with the people's mistakes and the people's flaws and the people's errors and taking that which you have. Obviously, we live in a time and an era in which everyone is bored, everyone is preoccupied with the next individual, the next person, what he's doing right, what he's doing wrong, hero worship, pop culture, media, and just looking for the next person to go to hell. And a person looking at another person doing righteous deeds and hoping to go to Jannah upon their backs and their efforts. Unfortunately, these are many things that we suffer from today in 2020. May Allah Azza wa Jal guide us and protect us and keep us firm. Allahumma ameen. So therefore, being afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, only of Allah Azza wa Jal, the balance that's required for that, and the benefit that comes from that. طيب. Khawf, obviously being something in your heart, an action of the heart, and also a state of mind as well. And we all know that fear in general, regardless of who or what you're afraid of, is one of the most powerful emotions. One of the most powerful emotions, an emotion that has driven countless human beings to doing so many acts of diverse nature, good, bad, negative, acts of heroism, acts of cowardice, acts of atrocity, people being afraid and scared. It's one of those strongest, if not the strongest emotion that you have. So if it's that strong and that powerful, then the Muslim has to have, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, a proper understanding of what it should be and what it should not be. What it should and should not be. Who you should and shouldn't be afraid of. When and when you shouldn't be afraid. Alright? How much, what's the ratio, what's the balance? Very important with regards to fear. So this chapter is talking about, we don't want to go too far into the history of fear and the philosophy, quote unquote, of fear and the psychology of fear, the history of fear. We just want to focus now on what the author is talking about, which is fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, which, as we said, is an action of one's heart. And it's a state of one's mind, and it translates to the physical deeds of the limbs, the digits, the organs, and the body parts. Everybody clear on that, inshallah ta'ala. So, the chapter of the obligation of fearing Allah. The chapter of the virtue of fearing Allah. The chapter of the fruits that you reap from fearing Allah, the Mighty and the Most High. That's what's meant by this chapter heading. Nawawi rahimahullah quotes several ayats from the Quran al-Kareem. And as we know, this is one of the most consistent Quranic themes. One of the most consistent Quranic themes is the fear of Allah, the Mighty and the Most High. And Allah, He gets this message across to us in several different styles, several different ways. He talks about the stories of the prophets and the messengers who feared Him before we came, before our time. Those who feared Him before us. And He talks about some of the terrors and perils, some of the things that would take place in the grave, the day of judgment, the hellfire, the time of death. And He wants from us fear. He wants us to be afraid of Him. He's shaking us up for us to do the right thing and to perform that which is correct. Allah Azza wa Jal, He talks about in the Quran al-Kareem those who lost His fear and ignored it, and those who felt safe from His plan, and those who thought that there was no need to fear Allah and that their fortresses could protect them, and things like this. So it's very beneficial for the Muslim, the servant, the slave, to read the Quran, to look into the Quran, and to understand these different styles of takhweef. وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. And we only send the ayat as a means of takhweef, making people afraid and making people scared. So it's very, extremely, crucially important. Tayyib. And we don't want to go too far into that. So the first ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah talks to Bani Israel, وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ. And only be afraid of me, only be scared of me. From the covenant, the pact that was taken from Bani Israel. Also from Surah Al-Buruj, a verse that we know of, a surah that many of us memorized, our children. إِنَّ بَطْشَ رَبِّكَ لَشَدِيدٌ. The batash, the seizing, the grabbing, the punishment of your Lord is shadid, is severe. Then he mentioned several ayat from Surah Hud towards the end of the surah. وَكَذَلِكَ أَخْذُ رَبِّكَ. And thus when your Lord seizes a people and punishes a people, is swift. And it is absolute. There's no hesitation, there's no respite. It happens. In akhda, and his akhd is alimun shadid, it's very painful and extremely excruciating. And Allah talks about a sign and a lesson for those who fear the hereafter. And He talks about the day of judgment, what will take place, what will happen, and why Allah delays the punishment. A time that He knows about, and what will take place on that day, those who will be happy and those who will be miserable. Also, the ayah from Surah Al-Imran, وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. And Allah warns you from Himself. Allah warns you from Himself, from His wrath, from His anger, from His punishment. And we recite every day in the Salah, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ. Allah protect us from the path of those who earned your wrath and earned your anger. Tayyib. Also, other ayats from Juz Amma, Surah Abasa, they talk about the reality of Day of Judgment. You run from your family members, your friends, your wives, your brothers, people that are closest to you, that you love, that you'll fight for, sometimes even die for them. And the thought and the fear of dishonor and shame for your family members and your name, your tribe, your kin, your kith. On that day, you will run from them. You have nothing to do with them on that day. And of course, that is definitely food for thought. That's definitely food for thought. one of the main themes of Juz Amma is takhweef, is khawf. It's the fear of Allah and the punishment of Ad and Thamud and Fir'aun. طيب. Then he quotes the ayah from Surah Al-Hajj, in which Allah Azza wa Jal clearly addresses His servants, An-Nas, people, humans, ittaqu rabbakum, fear your Lord. And that's because the shaking and the tremor of the Day of Judgment isn't something to be played around with. It isn't a small game or a joke. It's quite serious. So serious that it will cause the people to be in a drunken state, and other phenomenal paranormal things will take place on that day as well. He says here, وَالْآيَاتُ فِي الْبَابِ كَثِيرَةٌ جِدًّا مَعْلُومَاتٌ وَالْغَرَضُ الْإِشَارَةُ إِلَى بَعْضِهَا وَقَدْ حَصَلَ. He says there are so many ayat that talk about this. And they're well-known verses in the Quran as well. And the only thing that we wanted here was to point them out. Al-Ishara. Some of them. Bring your attention to some of them. وَقَدْ حَصَلَ, and we've done that. In other words, that's enough. And it shows you the style of not trying to encompass and enumerate every single thing, but giving a good solid portion, and the rest you can figure out and find and you know of yourself. Alright? وَأَمَّا الْأَحَادِيثُ فَكَثِيرَةٌ جِدًّا فَنَذْكُرُ مِنْهَا طَرَفًا وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. As far as ahadith, then they are also abundant. They're also countless, ample. And we'll only mention a few of them, and with Allah is all success. And before we move forward to the ahadith, you have to understand and you have to realize that it's very important for the slave and the servant to understand the style of the Quran, rather the styles of the Quran. And inshallah ta'ala, you should take a monthly goal, once a month, and study and focus all of the verses on one theme. Put them together, gather them, look towards them, and investigate them. Such as sabr. Look at all of the verses that talk about sabr. All of the verses that talk about fighting. All of the verses that talk about money. All of the verses that talk about fear. As we've just mentioned to you, some make it obligatory. Some show the virtue. Some give human real life examples. Some show those who felt safe. Some. Within the one style of Allah making us afraid and causing fear to be in our hearts and our minds, He does it in different ways. He talks about the grave. He talks about the fire. He talks about the boiling water, the hamim. He talks about the bari', the food that the people of hell will eat. He talks about being in hell forever. He talks about His anger. He talks about how they will call out to Malik, لِيَقْضِ عَلَيْنَا رَبُّكَ, tell your Lord to destroy us. And then He will say to him, إِنَّكُمْ, that you'll dwell therein forever. We brought you the truth, but you didn't like the truth. So there's so many different diverse angles and entangled, intertwined styles that deal with one subject. From khawf to jihad to nafaqah to mal to dunya, etc. So you as a Muslim, try your best to have a relationship with the Quran, in which you can write them down, you can compile them, you can put them together, and you can see and make a thorough assessment of the Quran and the guidance of the Quran. And I guarantee that you have a greater appreciation for this tremendous book that was sent down by Allah the Mighty and the Most High. Moving forward, he says, وعن ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه قال حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والصادق المصدوق إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر ب4 كلمات بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي وسعيد فهو الذي لا إله غيره إن أحدكم ليعمل عمل أهل الجنة حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها وأن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل النار حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل الجنة فيدخلها متفق عليه. So the first hadith he mentions here is the famous narration of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, which is well known to be from the early hadith from Nawawi's compilation of 40 And this hadith, the summary of it, it discusses how Allah created us and made us from something so small, something so minute, something so trifling, something so mean and base, insignificant. The water, blood, chewed flesh, etc., until walking, talking, thinking, feeling, plotting and scheming human being, unfortunately. Then he talks about how a person will do righteous deeds for a long period of time, maybe someone's lifespan. فَيَسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ, and the book will come into play, meaning the qadr. And the person will do deeds from the actions of the people of hell, people of the fire, and into that fire, وَلِيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ. And the opposite as well. The highlighting point from the hadith is that how can you feel safe that you'll die as a Muslim? How can you feel safe? What promise do you have that Allah is going to allow you to go to paradise? How do you know that? How do you know what's decreed for you, what's written for you, what's destined for you? You don't know. So therefore, be afraid, be scared, be thoughtful, be mindful, and take advantage of the time. Now, very important for us not to go to the extreme in this hadith or any other ayah with regards to fear. And many people, they suffer from extreme anxiety, and they suffer from OCD, and they suffer from wiswas, and they suffer from, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And they suffer from, am I a Muslim, maybe I'm a kafir, maybe I'm a munafiq. And they go extreme in this. And it causes them severe misery and severe suffering. And some of them may even actually leave Islam because of it. So as we mentioned before, there is a balance. The spiritual balance, the mental balance, the psychological balance. There must be a balance. And when there isn't a balance, something is sure to go wrong. And we have seen that in the history of the human being, let alone in the history of the Muslims. Let alone in the history of the Muslims. The next hadith, it says, وَعَنْهُ قَالَ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ يُؤْتَى بِجَهَنَّمَ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَهَا 70,000 زِمَامٍ مع كل زمام 70,000 ملك يجرونها. رواه Muslim. Also narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, on the day of judgment, hell will be brought forth, and it will have 70,000 reins, 70,000 ropes, strings pulling it. مع كل زمام, and every rein, every rope, every piece of tether, there will be 70,000 angels. 70,000 angels pulling it, dragging it along. And this hadith, as we said, is in Sahih Muslim. This goes to show us, and it goes to teach us the extremity and the gravity of the fire of hell, وَلِيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ. And that is huge, and that it's monstrous, and that it isn't a joke, and it isn't a game. Next narration is reported by, he says, وعن النعمان بن بشير رضي الله عنهما قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن أهون أهل النار عذابا يوم القيامة لرجل يوضع في أخمض قدميه جمرتان يغلي منهما دماغه ما يرى أن أحدا أشد منه عذابا وإنه لأهونهم عذابا متفق عليه. Nu'man ibn Bashir, may Allah be pleased with them both, reported that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, he said, I heard the Messenger of Allah ﷺ saying that the one who have the least punishment, the slightest punishment, the lowest level of torment in hell on the day of judgment is a man who will have stones, burning stones or coals, hot coals placed in his feet, and it will cause his brains to come to a boil. And he thinks that no one is worse than him. No one is being tormented and punished worse than he is. وَإِنَّهُ لَأَهْوَنُهُمْ عَذَابًا. Little does he know, and little do we know, this is the lowest level of punishment. La ilaha illallah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Very scary hadith. Punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a reality. And I don't think that we can even begin to fathom on these words, let alone take an attempt at grasping the reality of a person being tormented as such. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us therefrom. Allahumma ameen. Khair, inshallah. We'll stop here. There are many ahadith he mentions in the chapter that all prove the same thing with regards to the obligation of being afraid of Allah the Mighty and the Most High. And of course, as it states in some narrations, two types of fear or two types of safety that would never be given to the servant. The two types of fear. First, fear of a person being afraid of Allah in the dunya, and also afraid on the Day of Judgment. And the two types of safety, a person feeling safe from Allah's wrath in this world, and also experiencing safety on the Day of Judgment. Just won't happen. So if you're afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a beautiful thing. And that fear, inshallah, proves sincerity, and it would turn out to be fuel and energy for you to do the right thing, to perform the right thing, and to be upon the straight path. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best.